Good.
I'd like to call to order this regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting for Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we go on, we have 4 members in attendance. Brianna and Eileen are not available for tonight's meeting. Not in attendance is the first select woman as well. So we'll move forward. Is there any public comment? Hearing none. We'll move on. Communications and correspondence, we didn't have any. On the approval of the minutes, I'd like to make a motion that the minutes be adjusted for the Board of Education appropriation request from $63,416.72 to $62,416.72. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Good catch.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those approving the amendment?
Aye.
And then I guess we'll make a motion to approve the amended minutes as discussed. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
A discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Minutes passed. Okay. I spoke with the first select woman is not here, so we will not have a report. I spoke to Bob Belden. He's in the teachers' negotiations, so when he comes in, we'll make a motion to adjust the agenda accordingly. So, Marcia, you're up. Bright and early.
I have 30 seconds. While I'm getting the monitors on, I will say I don't have a PowerPoint tonight. We were trying to get ready for the audit, but I want to show you a few things that I do have. And but rest assured that my PowerPoint is in use tonight. If you were to watch the Board of Finance meeting in East Lyme, you'll notice it looks very much like ours, and I hope you change the name before you use it.
That's funny.
But they find him to be a breath of fresh air. He is doing wonderfully. Kevin, our former deputy controller, incredible stuff he's doing down there. That they're getting 0.08% on 0.0. I said, Kevin, you're an idiot. It's you write it 0.8% when you have the percent sign. He said, if we were getting 0.8%, that so they have approved using Newtown Savings Bank that we use, and are getting going to get 2.3%. That so
He's a star already.
Yep.
he is a star already.
Couldn't have had a better person to train.
So I just wanted to, I was going to try and get it pretty, and I just trying to figure out what is the best use of my time. I'm going to just show it to you. That you received it in advance, that our collections are very good, as we had expected. That we're a little bit different in taxes, about $60,000, and if you remember, taxes are really calculated on a cash basis, but from the year September 1 to August 31st. So it's weird, I know. That so we had to wait till that ended. We've got $709,000 over budget on taxes. One of the very interesting things is our outstanding taxes have been cut in half. That we had $1 million last year, we've got $500,000 this year as far as the receivables. That it was such a difference that I reduced the allowance for doubtful accounts because it was too high based on where we were. But that's because of all the refinancing and all the sales that and the tax sales that we had. So taxes are in really good shape. That licenses and permits were not much different than what we looked at. That we got some vendor permits the last day of the month, the last day of the year. Included, is it included here? No, I think it's down a little further. I guess it's down a little further. Okay. But that's a little bit better than what we had expected in May when we were trying to prorate it and figure out what we would have. The intergovernmental revenue, that we're over budget on that. Everything is as expected. The education cost sharing we've talked about all year, that's this line here. We've talked about that all year being over, and that's only because the state approved their budget after we approved our budget. But the interesting things, FEMA for, I can't wait till the storm is over, Isaias, I believe it's called, that the total that we would get from that storm is $332,000. Again, that's Kevin loved to do that. And, that one storm is more than we received in the 10 prior years of FEMA money. But that was the one in 2020, I believe it was. Some of that we recorded, I just wanted to reconcile it out, that some of that we recorded as revenue in 2021. We recorded as revenue in the year that FEMA obligates it. So if they say, good to go, whether we receive the money or not, once they approve it, that's when we record it. And last year they recorded 11,000. It's a bunch of different sections that they approve it in. Another 54,000 we received in as revenue, but we paid it back out to the fire departments and WPCA because it was for their costs. And then in the budget for 2023, we talked about, Ralph had asked if he could spend some FEMA money since that's all wear and tear on his trucks, just to remind us that that's his trucks that we're getting some of that money from, the use of the trucks. And so we funded a mower with that, and we said it would be the first in and first out. And since we had a surplus in revenue last year, I didn't want to be stressing about it and bringing it up again that, oh yeah, we're getting FEMA money, but don't count it because we're taking 80,000 out. So I took it out of here. I can change any of this, the subjective things. And then, it said ISA, but it's IDA. IDA, that we had one section obligated for $7,300, and the rough order of magnitude of that grant, I think, maybe $150,000 more. So that would come in this fiscal year, and some has since been obligated in this fiscal year.
This fiscal year, meaning 23?
23.
Yes.
We also did receive, they did obligate the vaccination grant that I believe it's about $60,000. There were vaccination, it was reimbursing us for 21 and 22. 21 was in the general fund, 22 was in the grant fund. So once we repay the grant fund and wash that out, the rest will come into revenue in the general fund. And so if the total was about 50, the grant fund had about 10, that there's maybe 40 that's coming in, and don't quote me on the numbers, but about that will come in as extra revenue in the general fund in 2023. Let's see, they were behind me. Charges for services, we did great. The conveyance fees were over $100,000 in June. It was a busy month. So that's the one that's a lot higher than what we had expected at the end of May. Alarm fines, all that is as expected. Blight fines, this is what we received in blight fines. I did also, because when you listen to Greg Dombowski talk, he always says, well, that property's got $86,000 of fines against it, and we're going to collect that. So I didn't want to lose track of it. We've recorded it as a revenue, and we've offset it with a deferral since we don't know when we're going to collect it.
But we have costs against that, though. We have legal fees against the
But we
blight.
pay the legal fees on a current basis.
Right.
So
Okay.
when that money comes in,
Okay.
it'll be ours. And it's about, between two properties, it's about $160,000
Okay.
that, and increasing $100 a day or something.
So how does that accounting work? You're recognizing it as revenue?
I didn't recognize, we can only recognize it in revenue if we think
Collectible in
on
the
taxes, it's the next 60 days. On everything else, we've changed our policy to the next year.
Right.
I didn't know if we were gonna recognize it in the next year. I didn't wanna say, oh yeah, it's gonna be revenue and then have it not. So I assumed we're not gonna recognize it in the next year. So the entry is a debit to receivable and a credit to deferred revenue.
Okay.
Just so we don't lose track. And then cell tower, every year we've been recording the payment in June. It's really July. We trued that up this year. So we did receive all the revenue we're supposed to. It's just accounting, trying to get it all in the precise period. The biggest thing on any of the revenue is this, the bond premium. The bond premium was, we thought we were going to use 1.6 million, and that's part of our debt bubble coverage. And back in February, we talked about, well, revenue was coming in higher. We thought we wouldn't need the whole 1.6 million, and we thought about 900,000 we wouldn't need. And so when we did the budget for 23, and we projected out the one-time revenues to cover the debt bubble, we projected that we'd have 900,000 that we wouldn't use this year and we'd use in the prior years. Right now, and again, this is just my calculation, that it can be changed. Right now, I'm recommending that we use 426,000. And that would leave us 1.2 million, another 300 to 350,000 to move forward for the debt bubble. And the way I got that is here. With that, we're over budget 281,000 in revenue. The expenditures are under budget 272,000. There's a few gap adjustments, encumbrances and things that on the bottom of the budget to actual in the draft financial statements that you have. So the change in our fund balance, if we do this, is going to be $518,000, an increase of $518,000. The reason I picked that number, if you look over to the side here.
Matching it to the same percentage.
Matching it to the same percentage. We don't want to lose track.
We got to talk about that though right now, because everybody's talking about the general fund. Our budget went up from 71 million to 74 million. And yet we put $518,000 back into the general fund, but we didn't raise the percentage.
Right.
We didn't raise the percentage.
We didn't raise the percentage.
Correct. And the percentage that we have now, again, this is just in draft, we can change it, I tried to match it to last year, within 5 digits there. I tried to match it to last year, so that, we're not, it's a tough time, we know, for taxpayers, it's a tough time for us, so if we kept it flat at the 15.59%, that's where we would need 426,000 to be used to keep it flat. What that means is that, let's say next year we can't pass a budget, we have 57 days to pass a budget, and if we don't pass a budget in 57 days, we either, 1, run out of cash, 2, have to set a budget and set a mill rate without the people voting on it. That'll not always go over well. Or 3, borrow money. So we have 15.59%. The minimum rule of thumb for best practice under the Government Finance Officers Association, that they set best practices for governments, is 16.67%. That's 2 months of cash flow. However, they also provide us with a worksheet to do a risk assessment that we may be different than that. It'll never go less than 16.67%, but we are different than that. And so we did calculate the worksheet, and when we did, it was up into the 20s. When we set our fund balance policy, and we thought that, you thought it was fine, but you thought it was too high, so we reduced it to 18%. So we're below best practice, we're below where we want to be, but that keeps it flat. And so that's how that was decided, and I will pause for these fine people.
So basically, before we go to them, if we don't add any money, our percentage goes down, period.
Correct,
Correct.
Because
the
our budget goes up.
That's what people aren't
Right.
understanding about this percentage.
correct.
We gotta keep feeding it to keep it the
Yep.
same.
Yep, it was 57 days last year, it's 57 days this year. And it's not just in case we don't pass a budget. We've saved, $80,000, $100,000 a year from not doing bond anticipation notes because we can fund these ourselves with our cash flow. So we didn't have to do bond anticipation notes for this water line that we're supposed to be closing on September 30th. We don't have to do it for capital projects. We were doing that every year. If you go back and look at the budgets, I think the last time we did it, it was $80,000 or so. So if we were to use some of our fund balance, you think of it like, okay, that I'm going to go down to part-time and live off my savings. Okay, well, my savings will run out. 57 days, my savings will run out, and then I've got to go back to full-time, and that's the same thing here, that we could say, oh, let's use our fund balance. It's gone. It's a one-time fix, and it's irresponsible.
Yep. Best practice is best practice for a reason. It's not just,
Correct.
not just throwing darts.
Correct.
And, ideally we would, I know we said this in the spring, ideally we would continue to grow that percent. But Glenn's right, at a minimum, we gotta maintain the percent by continuing to fund it. So as we move through this year and get into next spring, that's gonna be a constant theme, and pulling from that general fund or reducing the percent should not be an option that anybody considers.
However,
However.
Agreed, but when we set the fund balance policy, we said that, oops, I'm on the wrong page. When we set the fund balance policy, we tried to be fiscally responsible, and we said that we would divide it in half.
Mm-hmm.
That half of our fund balance we want to put aside and not touch, and half of our fund balance we'll put out there for emergencies. That was part of our policy, and we've been keeping, although it's still part of the same, both together are the 15.9, we have been putting this assigned fund balance that at some point, if we had to, we would be willing to touch. However,
I was gonna say however as well, go ahead.
yeah, however, that fund balance, then it goes down. So if we were thinking about maybe this is the year we might have to touch it, then we want to increase what we're putting aside by more money.
We'll come back to this.
So we'll come back. Yep.
Because I have a few things I want to add to that. So I'd like to make a motion, we move to the BOE financial report. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Bob, please, welcome.
Do you mind if we do the capital item?
We're gonna do it right next, after your first financial, we'll roll right into the capital.
Okay, so, all right, so I'm gonna give you a verbal update today.
Yep.
And I wrote to Tara today, and I told her that there's some, and I think Marcia, who sat in our finance
Excuse me
committee.
for 1 second. Harry and Paul, this was gonna be talking to schools,
Sure.
why don't you come up here instead of sitting in the background
Yeah,
too?
there you go.
I like the background.
Well, I know, but I mean, I feel rude that we're gonna go into these discussions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So every month I give an update on where are we on the current year budget, and I want to just do that verbally again this year. We had a very lively discussion at our own finance committee meeting this past Monday, because as I told you last month, we had some exposures who were growing and they were only going in the wrong direction. So the way I'd like to, I don't have charts, so I apologize for that, but I wanted to split this into a couple of buckets, and I'll tell you what the buckets are in advance. There's the bucket of things that you all have been carrying a centralized contingency for, right? And my fear with that in general is the risks on these items is actually exceeding the amount we've set aside as contingency. So that means we're gonna have to take an action of some sort.
And those include special ed,
Yes.
salary.
Special ed salaries and health insurance, because we knew about that item.
Yep.
Those three. There's the Other business issues, right, which like heating oil is the obvious one. I'll talk to you through what our sizings on those are. And then we have savings, right? We've actually been very active in trying to identify savings that we could book in the current year because of the size of these exposures. The net is $500,000 in the wrong direction, right? In which I don't think you have contingency of that size. So that's why I think it's too early to be asking for specific help because it's beginning of September. The school year has just started, but it's something I think we have to monitor and start thinking about what potential actions. And we've talked with Dr. Brill and the administrative staff about getting aggressive immediately on where can we identify savings, and he's already kicked that off with the administrative team.
So that 500,000 net is.
Let me walk
I'm
through
sorry,
the-
but
walk
I just
through
want
the
to make sure I
numbers.
know that's not just a 3-month to date. That's
No,
kind of the
that's
estimate.
an estimate. That's an
Estimate for
estimate.
the
That's
year.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I just want to make sure I
So let's
understand.
just kind of go through what we're seeing. Special education tuition, right? There's two parts of special education, tuition and transportation. We actually have the same number of students that we had put in our budget, but the tuition line is currently estimated at $267,000 higher than we have budgeted. Why is that? The reason is we had 3 inexpensive students leave the program and 3 very expensive students enter the program.
But we've talked about this many times.
Yeah.
This is not a new
This is
discussion
what
for
happens,
us.
right?
This is the fluidity of, you've
That's
shown us
exactly
this
the issue, right?
many times, you've
Yeah.
shown us this.
And so to give you an idea, the 3 that exited saved us $78,000. The 3 that came in added $293,000. They were almost
Right.
$100,000
Right.
apiece on just the tuition line.
Right.
Usually it's $100,000 for tuition and transportation. In this case, the tuition lines alone happen to be very, very expensive programs.
But we've also discussed this, it's so difficult to budget for that.
Exactly.
Because you can't ever
No.
estimate what you have.
Yep.
So we're all on the same
Yep.
page.
No, I know we are. I'm not arguing with you. I just, thank you for clarifying that,
Yeah.
because that's exactly the issue that we all face. On top of that, there have been 2 large increases due to school charges, right? The rates are going up, right? And in some of it's programmatic. They're adding different things to the students' program, but in other cases, it's actually tuition rates going up. So inflation, unanticipated inflation, that added $67,000. And then there's about 14,000 of other small changes here and there amongst the different tuitions. So these are all P times Q, right? This is what we're getting from the different programs we do out there, but they all net up to $267,000 of risk. We are on September 14th. These evaluations happen all through the fall, right? Usually we're getting news one way or the other through the September, October, November, December, even into January and February, right? That will affect the current year. So this is one we're monitoring very carefully, and it haven't gone in our favor so far. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the related transportation. We're doing a bottoms-up student by student, but that's up $116,000 because I believe we're going to find that where we're taking the kids to, the people who left, we're going to the Newtown, close by Newtown type of programs or
Right.
Danbury type of programs, are the ones who came in are going a lot further. So that's $116,000 special ed related. But Ken has promised he's going to do a P times Q all the way from the bottom, with the bus company. So we'll have more on that next month. So the 2 of those together is almost $400,000. The second big category is teacher turnover. We budget a savings of $200,000 in each budget. We used to have that contingency in our own budget, and now we've been aggressive and carrying it at the town. In the last 3, maybe even more years, it's all worked in our favor,
Yep.
right? Which has been good. This year it's working in the other direction. We're $105,000 short of that $205,000. Now there's still, we're working on 2 resignations, so that number will move a little bit, but so far it has not yielded the $200,000 that we had aggressively budgeted. And lastly, the health insurance rate increase. This isn't a new number; it's another $105,000. So the that grouping of variances is about $600,000, and I know you guys don't carry that much in contingency, so that's why I say, you know, just as a starting point, we know there has to be a discussion where, as a Board of Ed, we're continuing to take aggressive actions, but we need to kind of have, you know, reach an agreement of what can be covered with contingency, what can't, and that's where you guys can help a lot. So I think it's something we can work on in the next couple of months as we're working on this. Outside of that, there's the things that are normal business things. Heating oil is $176,000 overrun is the current projection for the year, and diesel fuel $100,000, right? And it's all rates, it's not consumption. So that shouldn't be a surprise. We knew that was going to be a big number. That's $276,000 between the two of them. Those are the two big variances on the upside that we're seeing so far. We have not heard a lot of inflationary increases on other things, which is good news so far, but there's still time to yet to go.
But in reality, it can't change too much because your biggest drivers
Those are
what
our
we
big
talked
drivers,
about.
yeah.
So inflation on the remaining, because 66% of your budget's salaries, which is fixed, you know, to the point. Then we're dealing with another transportation and stuff we've dealt with. So the inflation can't drive too much.
It would be IT items,
That's
and
what
it
I'm
would
saying.
be
You don't have-
school supplies.
You don't have enough out there to change a needle.
Well, and the odds are, those are the things we'd have to freeze, you
Right.
know, start
Right.
shutting down anyhow,
Yeah,
so
which
it's.
on the flip side isn't gonna have this huge
so
impact
we'll-
either
No,
on the
because
freeze,
it
yeah.
can't, because your big numbers are out there. Your big numbers are hit already. So these are the crumbs. They still.
The total of those, if you add them up specifically, is $869,000 in
Yeah.
exposure, and 2/3 of it is the stuff that would have been covered by
Mhm.
contingency. Now, we have identified $351,000 of potential savings already, and as I said, we just kicked it off with the administrative team to see what we can find, get everything that walks, right, to figure out how we can find savings. But the administrator turnover is actually worked in our favor by $72,000. We did change over principals, right, and so that's where that comes from. We will not fill the director of instruction. As you know, she went to be center school principal, and we're going to leave that with a new assistant principal for the remainder of this year. We'll leave that position open. We've been holding that as a maybe, and I think we concluded we have to leave it open this year. We've had some savings in the special education extended school year program of $49,000. That's behind us, right? That's a summer program, and we're not hiring the bilingual teacher. And the reason is there was no one with the proper certifications available.
That's
And I mentioned that
90,000.
last month.
Yeah.
So we have found a way to meet the needs of the students without the state required formal bilingual teacher for the current year. It did need state approval, right, to do that because it is their requirement. But their rule is very simple. If you can't find one with the right certifications, you can deal with a normal special ed instructor. And we happen to have gotten.
Yeah, so we were able to hire a language teacher, world language teacher, with the appropriate certification. And then we were able to modify the program to meet the minimal needs of the students. And then, so that's where we're at.
So that's another $91,000. So some of those is $351,000 of savings against this this set of exposures. So.
Bob, what was the breakdown on the first two, the not filling the director of instruction and the summer
Oh,
program?
I'm sorry, the administrator turnover was $72,000, the director of instruction was $138,000, the summer ESY program was $49,000, almost $50,000, and the
Okay.
bilingual teacher was
So you're
$91,000.
about 520 right now.
So it's about, well, we use a rough $500,000 as our
Yeah.
exposure. Things move
It-
20,000 here and
yeah.
there. It's a $500,000 overall exposure right now. So that's kind of where we are. Things are all going in the wrong direction, sadly. But you know what, we're going to keep being aggressive, and we understand there's a fiscal responsibility here, so we don't want to screw up our programs, but at the same time, we know we have to keep working the budget. So Eileen does attend our monthly meetings, and she's been a great asset, much like Mary's been joining us in the negotiations, and that would be the second thing I want to mention. I can't talk about the negotiations themselves in public because that's part of the ground rules, but I will just let you know that schedule-wise, tonight is actually the mediation. And if you remember, you go through I think we've done 5 or 6 sessions of negotiations, tried to work things. We've actually come to agreements on a goodly number of things, usually not very complex ones, and the hard ones end up going to a mediation, where you actually have a mediator going between 2 rooms and trying to find a settlement. Right? Paul's smiling because he's lived through this, and then if that fails, which we go to arbitration, which is a binding arbitration, where it's each item gets put on the table and the board of arbitrators decides A or B. Right? They don't negotiate a middle or split the baby. It's a last best offer type of mode, and the arbitrators can choose either the board's approval or the union's approval. And you get the best way I do it is you get a grab bag of answer when you go to mediation with a lot of issues. So we're all, I think the union and the town are very motivated to try and settle this evening. We're expecting a long evening.
Very good.
So that's where we are on that. So thank you very much for joining us through all
Thanks
these
for having
meetings. It's a learning experience. I've lived through those.
So everything you talked about is everything we sort of anticipated. This isn't any surprise
No.
in what we're at. I mean, we've always talked about the special ed being fluid. You could have 3 in, 3 out, same numbers, but the class of the services provided changes that number. And that's been explained to you now, to us for years now, so we understand that. Obviously, the powers and the way we do business in this town has changed. We used to have the 3 boards work very well together. We're a little splintered right now, and so it's going to have to go through a process where we really can't comment too much on this because of the current situation. In the past, we've been able to work with the first selectman and figure this all out. I think it's got to take a different route now. So I think from our point of view, you'll have our support, but we can't give it to you.
Unless it goes to the board of selectmen, we got that.
Yeah, so I just want you to be aware that.
No, we got it, and you know what, it does need a little more time to simmer before we're actually asking, because the interesting thing about unlike project work, right, the school budget does have an ebb and flow to it, right, and this last year, we brought our request for funding right at the end of the year, but we were watching it all the way along.
And you informed us the whole
And we
way.
informed you every step of the way, and we will intend to continue that. And especially as if the numbers stay large, right, we will all need to come up with some actions, right? And I don't think the schools will solve everything on its own backs, and it's probably going to need the help of the town as well, so.
Since Harry is here and sort of sitting in for Dara, I personally think this is a problem we got to start talking about now, though.
Yes.
Because this, like you've always said, you can't change the ship in January or February. We got to start thinking about the ship now and what we're going to do, and we got to have a plan, and that plan's got to come to us in the end here. We got to figure it out where we don't suffocate the schools, and we have enough funding to cover things, and we don't touch the general fund like Dan said, and it's going to take effort, and I know you guys are going to put it in, but there's got to be support from everybody in this process, and that the Board of Selectmen got to give that support.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna add that this discussion's not in a vacuum. This discussion's in addition to all the other new expenses that the town is facing that needs the plan.
And some of the exposures I have are also on the town side.
Exactly,
Right,
and this
exactly.
budget has to be balanced. Some of the other ones don't have to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's,
I've been in your situation. I was on
Oh, you
negotiations
were.
for 11 years. And my last, I've mentioned this before, in November, I was going to become a selectman in December. Our last meeting we had, I'm not sure who was in there with me.
I was with you.
Yeah, we had
That
a
was the-
special meeting. We had 12 special ed students identified in November to the tune of $880,000
Yes.
that we had to come up with.
We
So,
all, there are many of us around this table who remember
Yeah.
that.
so I'm confident that the Board of Selectmen, we understand, especially with me having the experience that I have. We understand, and we have to do what's best for the schools and for the residents.
Yep.
And, I'm glad that you opened this up a little bit because, these are very hard decisions. This reminds me of 2008, when the Board of Ed had a -1/2 we had a minus 0.5% budget. We had about a 3.5% increase in just staples, just, fuel, insurance, salaries, and we had a minus 0.5. We were able to get through it. They're a very difficult situation. We're in a tough spot. People need to understand that. What I'd like to do, and I've been talking to Tara, is to have a special meeting and go through pretty much our whole program. Go through capital, go through personnel, go through purchases, and just spending. Go to a spending freeze, unless it's absolutely something to do with something that's a danger as far as health-wise or safety. And we are in kind of you said it before, Glenn, it's kind of a perfect storm between COVID, the price of materials and services. Fuel is almost 1%. The increase in fuel is about $600,000, I think, this year, which would be almost 1% of our school budget. It's just crazy where we are. I'm figuring it out to be about between $600,000 and $700,000. But
I told you the fuel was 276.
Right.
276
Well, it's pretty-
downside, we're probably
It's over,
4,000.
so last year we had a wonderful rate, so that I think what you're
You're doing it year to
calculating
year, right.
is the total over
Okay.
last year, and what
Okay.
you're
Still a big
calculating
number.
is
That's
the
good.
total
It's
over
no matter how
budget.
you cut it.
It's a big number.
But
And I think-
the bottom line is, I had talked with her about having a special meeting as soon as we can to go through and start to work on how can we cut our spending. I have full confidence in what's going to happen tonight, whatever is approved, whatever isn't approved, or in the future. I have full confidence in the Board of Finance. I know that the decisions are going to be made both on our side of the room and the Board of Finance is going to be based on one thing, and that's what's best for the taxpayers, and what's best for Brookfield. I have full confidence in that, and there may be things that have to be cut. I'm not necessarily talking about Board of Ed. In both boards, and it's a tough place to be in right now. But I have full confidence, and I think that we will be able to work together to get this resolved. But people just understand, Bob, and anybody on the Board of Ed, we've had come to where everything is on the table, and people get afraid of that. They get afraid when you say that. But things are, pretty much everything is, as far as I'm concerned, at least to be looked at. I think if you're not looking at it, then you're being negligent. Doesn't necessarily, we went through that with the alternative high school, where we said everything is on the table, and we got crushed by people saying, don't cut that. Well, at least you have to look at it, and is there a better way we can be running, or whatever.
I think we're all gonna agree though here, we gotta figure out a way to smooth this out, not suffocate each side either.
Right.
The key is to get through this with smart fiscal management, not to suffocate, not to cut too far, but to be responsible on all ends, and maybe give a little and smooth off the edges. Like the Board of Ed had to freeze their budget this past year in
The
what
last
month?
7 years.
No,
Every year-
but I
every year-
mean,
every year that
March,
I've
I
been
think.
here.
Around March, that's what I'm trying to say, around March, we had to smooth it out like you're talking about. This year, we might have to look at it, bringing that further ahead. I know don't get me wrong, it's a hardship, so please, I understand that.
Glenn, just so you know, the communication I sent to my department heads and principals yesterday was by afternoon of Tuesday next week, I want to know what you're thinking. And we're going to sit down, so we're right on it, right away.
But the
Since our
key
minds-
is no suffocation, but getting it right.
Absolutely.
Yep. I would
This is
agree.
the whole process that we
Very
gotta think
strategic.
about and work together, and that's where we gotta get stronger together, because I think we can all help each other. There's a lot of good minds on this side of the table to get things through. Marcia, another great asset. I think that but we gotta be careful not to suffocate, but not to get too far out of hand.
Thank you for that.
All
We
right.
agree with you. So,
That's
it's,
good.
and I worry about an eventuality where you have another November, right? Like you just described, right? And that would move us from a big worry bee to hell on wheels,
Yeah.
right? And so that's, we're watching it very carefully. Ken's doing a really good job of keeping on top of things, right? So,
And the last thing I like to add is we can't take the easy way out. We gotta make the right way out. right? I mean, we can't take easy fruit if it's gonna affect us 3 years down the road either. Our decisions have to be made with what's the action and the reaction. Before we get on, Dan, any comments on this? Ryan, Mary? All right, let's get, because I know you gotta go.
Thank you very much. Just as a one last aside is, we know the audit's been kicked off and the team is working hard to support that as well, so.
So I'd like to make a motion that we go to new business, Board of Education request for additional funding. Do I have a second?
A second.
Discussion, none, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so,
So on this one, this brief stage setting, I'm gonna turn it over to my vice chair and head of our facilities committee to brief you in on it, but we have gone to the Board of Selectmen on this, who approved it. And thank you for the Board of Selectmen's, just on behalf of the board, for the support there. They're awkward situations. They're rare, right? They're rare because often when we bring forward programs, we don't tend to overrun, but it's like you've said in the past, the COVID environment is, costs are going up, right? So that's the root of this. So with that, we turn it over to Joy.
Hey, thanks for having us. So we're here to discuss, two capital projects, the locker room, boys locker room, and the Wispmeer wall. So we'll start with the locker room. We really started the meat of this work back in 2019. We took several tours of the locker room. We asked a lot of questions, and many questions to Eddie from Tecton for clarification on many items. We discussed possible state funding, discussed other possible storage areas, discussed the lack of handicap accessible plumbing fixtures, and we also discussed phasing the project, but came to the conclusion that that wasn't fiscally responsible. Steve Baldwin provided pages and pages of data about usage for sports, PE classes in the community, problems with the locker room, health concerns, all of that. So we didn't go out to bid until 2020. That was a year later because of COVID. And when it went out to bid, it came in at 50,000 more. So the original
Actually, came in to over double.
over double, right, to 2.8, exactly, sorry about that. So, we revisited, and because I'll go into why it came in so high. So during the course of the original design work, it was discovered that the existing ventilation system needed to be removed and replaced in its entirety. So an entirely new heating and ventilation system was needed. So about 556 for mechanical, electrical plumbing systems.
When was that one?
Sometime-
I'm sorry, when was,
They discovered that during the
During the
bidding
bid.
process. They actually had to I think, Paul, you could expand on that, but they actually had to open up the system to see whether it was
Yeah,
reusable.
during that discovery process with the engineers and the more intensive investigation, it was noted that the existing H&B systems had to be discarded in their entirety.
So that was in the spring of '21?
That was in spring of '20.
No.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of, back and forth there where we've gone to Tecton and said, hey, look, your mechanical engineer at that point should have apprised us of this. The town was never apprised of that. It actually only came out during a postmortem of that original bid to say, why was it so high? And that's where it was.
So due to the increase in the, MEP scope, market conditions, and supply chain, that rose the cost. So we thought we were gonna be able to reuse the equipment, and now we can't. So now with COVID and supply chains, demand condition, market conditions, spikes in prices we haven't seen, everything has changed. So we went back out to bid, and that's when the new bid came out. So we scaled back the project, and we can show you a diagram of that in a little bit, of what that new, but remember that when we originally did the original bid, we bid as a whole package. We didn't piecemeal it. What was taken to the voters was the whole package. So we just took some phases out and rebid it, and that rebid came out 50,000 more. And then we took the recommendation from the NBC to build a contingency. About 5% was 68,000. So the new total was 1.4. Additional refunding requested 117,176.
if I could just add to that, we are underrunning on another project, Board of Ed project, in the same bonding package, because you have to manage these within the bonding package by more than 117. So the request here is just a redirection within the bonding package between two Board of Ed projects. And that one that's underrunning is the Wisconsin Middle School electrical control system. The bids came in low on that one. So sometimes they give and sometimes they take away. So in this case, I think the trade-off is between two Board of Ed packages. And I'll show you the numbers in a second.
Can you show them the draft plan?
Yeah, so you had said this, Glenn, well, we ought to look at the diagrams because I think it's something else. You got it from the last time. So,
Are these the same as the presentation?
yeah, this is from the presentation
Yeah,
that
slide
we got.
20.
So, Marcia, you wanna pull that up?
Page
So
20.
people can
Page
see.
Slide
20.
20.
From what presentation?
From the one when we brought it forward in the first place.
April 20 and 9, 2
I'll
and
take
20.
that for,
Yeah,
yeah, April 20.
I have a
That's 20.
different one, but it's the same,
Yeah, in April 8th,
same
2020.
slides.
yeah, it's the same slide. So,
I have the
Yeah,
24
I-
one.
you know, it's chart 20 and the deck we were looking at, hoping it's the same.
Marcia has
It
that.
should be called draft plan alternates. Has a lot of colors in it.
So you see what's in white is the original big scope of the work, actual locker room.
Here we go.
So, yeah, so, okay.
So the
So we-
white is the main part of the work, right? And when we had laid it out for everybody, we said we were gonna add, we were gonna add a number of things that were important. The orange on this chart is the outdoor accessible bathrooms. The green and the blue were just revamping some storage rooms. And the pink was revamping the entire weight room area. So the things that dropped out in the rebid were the green and the blue and the pink, right? The two storage rooms, we said we'd live with what we have. And then we would not revamp the weight training room just because basically the cost of that was offset by this discovery that we had to replace air handling systems. So that pink area is the important thing that drops off. The good news is the main refurbishment of the locker rooms and the coaches' offices, and there were some issues about the coaches' offices, like, for example, their visibility into the locker rooms, that'll get fixed, continue to get fixed. The outdoor accessible bathrooms will continue to get fixed. All the shower stalls, all the bathrooms, all the offices will all get fixed. It's just revamping the weight room in those two little storage rooms. So that's what we can't get to. And it would probably cost another $500,000 to $500,000 to $700,000 to add them in.
Can I just note that the bathrooms that are going to be accessible from the outside is a future savings for us, because at some point we would have to put facilities out there for people and to take out the, am I correct in that?
And I think today we use porta potties.
Today
out
we're
there.
using the porta potties. This allows us to not use the porta potties and provide facilities for events and students or people who are outside, which we would have to do at some time in the near future anyway. So that, it's not actually a savings, but it's going to be for a future savings.
And you do have even though this is the boys' locker room project, you have an outside accessible boys and girls bathroom to the outside, so the scope of the core is retained, the outside bathrooms is retained, and the coaches' offices are retained, so, which the coaches' offices, part of the issue was, you could hear the coaches talking in back-to-back offices, so it was kind of hard, a little awkward. But more importantly, they had no visibility into the
Sightlines.
locker rooms. The sightlines were bad, so that gives you better oversight, right, in the locker room. So all the really good things are retained. The only thing you feel at all badly about is not revamping the weight room. That would end up having to be revalidated on its own merits at some future date. So that's the change in the scope. And that's consistent, by the way, with everything we talked about up to now. So those were all parts of the package that we bid out.
Are there any questions with that before we go on? to-
Yeah, a whole bunch.
Okay, I
Well,
figured.
before you get to the general process, let's recap the Whiskey Wall one, and then I'll give you the summary numbers, and we can talk about those,
All right.
and we can
that's-
talk process.
Oh, I got, okay, go ahead.
So the approved funding, 796,000, went out to bid around the same price. But we had some unanticipated costs, the asbestos monitoring at 19,200 and the specialized testing that's needed to be done at 8,600. And again, we took the recommendation of the NBC to build in those, that contingency soft costs. 5% would be 41,179. So additional funding request of 68,500.
So on this one, remember, we had very high level estimates. Remember, it was originally 300,000, then it was ranged at 500 to 700,000, and the bid came in at 795, and I think you all had a special meeting based on the bid that came in.
Actually, the bid came in at 1.1 million.
Uh-huh.
We value engineered it down
Yeah.
to 795.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's right, there was a higher number. So right now, the funding is approved to match the bid, right? But didn't pick up these other items or any contingency.
Approved to match the contract value.
The contract value, not the bids, right?
Right.
So that one's a little more straightforward, right? It's a question of how you deal with some contingency, and I believe the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is this would come from.
At the time of the Board of Selectmen's meeting, I had said that we should take it out of the capital non-recurring available fund balance, this amount and the 96 amount, but since that time, we've had the financial statements all balanced, and so the other thought, I hate to take it out of there, but that's part of our debt bubble coverage. The other thought that, let's go back, is this right here. So it would go with that bigger conversation. Do we retroactively make a transfer in the 22 year that, to transfer 169 or whatever it is from, to capital non-recurring, and move that money there. So in essence, it's coming out of the surplus from last year. So both of those conversations of where our fund balance is going and where this is coming from would come the same. Ultimately, you know, it may not be that big of a difference. But
But ultimately, it's still coming through capital non-reoccurring. The vehicle's still, because you're gonna move money, you said, to capital.
But it's not coming from the preserved balance in
No,
there.
you're gonna move something into it, but it's still coming out of there. So it would
Correct.
go with the motion.
So in the end, it stays the same, but this one, it just, you know, keeps us not touching that. That's the only reason I like that. But either one, the motion was capital non-recurring for both of these.
Can you put in the stick? My stick?
Since I don't have enough ports, I have saved your stuff over
All
here.
right, so let's go to the Jim Wall timeline. The Jim Wall timeline, just for the public to see. I think this is accurate of where we were, when the funding came in, what has happened. So the funding, the first set of funding came in like September of '21, with $20,000 we approved, right? And then we went through a whole bunch of reiterations, keep going down, we picked up 20,000 there, we went through a bunch more, then we added 700,000, approved it in the capital budget, correct? And then we needed 90,000 additional approved,
96.
96, okay, typo error, my bad, 96. And now we're getting to the point where we're adding in, today, we're adding in the 165, 96, and 69 as the contingency, as a timeline of where we were.
68,500,
Yeah.
right?
So this is basically a timeline of the funding, where we're at, how the project's progressed.
Yeah, so on this project, there was a little bit of asbestos monitoring as we were doing the asbestos abatement. We discovered that we needed to have an on-site monitor, and then there's some specialized testing that's required at the end, right? And they're just unique things that would be additive to the contract. They're not large in the big scheme of things. And then the rest of the question, so no, that's 27 of that, and yeah, 68.5. That's 27 of that, and then there's 41,000 of contingency at the MVC's recommendation. That's about what you should carry for soft costs and coverage for unanticipated things at this point in a project. You do usually carry like 20% at the before you have bids, but at this point, 5% seemed like an appropriate amount. Did I get that right?
Yeah, for change orders and discovery conditions.
So,
I'll be honest, this one I understand. Paul and I are gonna disagree on the next one big, and I respect you, Paul.
I do too, Glenn.
This one I get. This was an emergency repair. This was, we gotta get it done, get anything in there we can, do it sensibly under your guidance, Paul, and I get it, then things happen. So this project, I understand, and I understand why we're adding contingencies, and I understand all of that. On this project, and these are just my notes, with I talked with Marcia, so I could do a little homework and understand it before we talk to it. There could be a little error in this, I don't want this to be gospel, but this was my notes, and I talked with Marcia as a timeline so I could understand before I spoke.
Now, your timeline here, though, really does highlight one thing, how fragmented this process really is in our town.
That's part of the process.
And that's,
You
this
see-
whole thing that you wrote should have been compressed.
I
into
didn't
the
write it,
first
I had
3
help
months.
writing it, let
No,
me
but
be
I'm saying it
clear.
should have been compressed into the first 3 months. Because when we're doing these capital projects, you had an initial 20 for the structural engineer, and then we had this for the asbestos monitor, and then we have this for, I forget who your, not the abatement, but your consultant is for the asbestos. We're doing this piecemeal.
And I get that under
Right.
this process, and that's something I had a conversation with Bob a little bit about today, is this one I understand. The boys' locker room, forget about it, okay?
We'll go there next. Let's stay on the wall.
But this one, I understand, hey, we had an emergency, we had to start somewhere, we opened up something, and you guys please add in, Dan and Ryan and Mary, that these things happen. And this is where we're at. This one I get. So is there any questions on this that we need to ask anymore?
No, this has to be done.
And I think we need to fix the school building. I mean, this is something that was damaged, we need to do.
There's not only damage there, and speaking with the structural engineer, there are inherent issues in the original construction of this building which caused this issue to happen some 20 years down the line. And those inherent issues are being fixed as well. It's not just putting up the block.
But in this is clunky, as you say. So here's a little bit where I get lost on projects. Who has ownership, who can approve, who can do things? And then let's go to the boys' locker room now, to my Excel sheet.
that's, by the way, that's the first thing I wrote down.
Who owns this?
No, it's that we have too many cooks in the kitchen.
No, go to the
It's
GR
issue with
comments
it,
and
we
the-
have too many cooks in the kitchen.
So now, this is another little, just a financial history on the boys' locker room, just to get notes. Some of these notes are inaccurate right now, so I'll clarify that. But we approved $50,000 in year 2019. We also approved an additional $35,000 in 2022. Now, if you break that money down, and this is just the design portion of this. If you break that down, we've spent $57,000 against that in Munis. However, all that's in Munis is a PO 200227 for $50,000. So we've overspent the PO by $7,000, and we have no visibility on the liabilities against the remaining $27,000. So we have no visibility on who could purchase against that, who's spending money against that. We have no visibility to that number, that extra 20-something thousand dollars. So this scares me on a project that's not an emergency. The emergency I get, I understand it, but this is a project start to finish. So that alone scares me that we have a purchase order for $50,000, we spent more than the purchase order, and we have $27,000 out there that's a liability that we don't even know who's spending against it, who owns it, who's the approver processes, and I know it's a small amount of money, so let's be clear. But this cascades now into the bigger picture of, this project hasn't had legs from the start. This project has not really been explained it's been explained, but we really didn't understand it from the start. And this just shows too, who has ownership, who gets rid of this clunkiness, who's the one that we say is responsible for that right there? Who's responsible for $7,000 getting spent without a PO? Where do we stand on this?
Can I answer?
Sure.
Okay, so this is one that we've recognized, and we actually have a meeting tomorrow. What the problem becomes is that this is, in Munis, it's divided into two sides, the town side and the Board of Ed side. And capital projects are an issue. And this has come up with Kevin's leaving. What used to happen is Dan Caldwell would come over, and originally it was talk to Jerry Gay, and they'd do it because Dan can't get into Munis on the town side, so Jerry would put it in, and when Jerry left, Kevin took it over, and when Kevin left, I said, we're not going to do that. That we don't have time to be the clerical person for Dan Caldwell. So a few weeks ago, we said, let's set up a meeting. That meeting is actually happening tomorrow. On the Board of Ed side, we need either Dan to do it. Usually the department heads don't do it themselves. It's their clerical person. And Betty Robel does Dan's operating costs, but she doesn't have insight into these costs because they're on the town side. So we have a meeting with the finance people and the IT people, so that the Board of Ed, if it can be done in Munis, the Board of Ed capital projects will follow the path of any Board of Ed costs, where they put in the purchase order, they put in and this is the way it should be, I think, that they put in the purchase order, they do the approvals through Munis of the purchase orders. When the bill comes in, the bill goes through, but the problem becomes, it's set up with a town fund, and so Munis automatically wants to push it so that I approve it, or it's approved on our side, and that's not appropriate. So that's what we're trying to figure out, is how can we make that process go through the Board of Ed side, and then when we pay the bill, it's been the town that's been paying the bills. You know, if we have to, who cares if the Board of Ed writes the check? It's the same account that we could give that up. But either way, that's been part of the problem, and this is the solution. Independent, before any of this happened, it was a time management type of thing where this started, was that we're not having that on our side, and when we do it that way and we carry the paper manually over to have somebody else put it in, there's no authorizations noted in there, and the system fails.
Right, but this scares me, that the system fails,
Yes.
because again, now, Paul, NBC has a hand in this project, and not in a bad way, so don't take it wrong, Dan Caldwell does. So you both could be writing purchase, or putting bills against these liabilities.
And right there is the issue. So generally, once the Board of Selectmen assigns a project to the NBC takes ownership and runs it. If the NBC is not running it, the people that, whether it's Board of Ed, whether it's DPW, they have ownership of it. And Marcia knows well, with the new school project, we have our purchase order requests. If we're requesting an increase for our purchase order, meaning we've expended that line item, we do POIs. You know, everything is very, very meticulous.
And I'll agree with that, but this doesn't have that same reflection.
Exactly. Now, this is that gray area where it was assigned to the NBC, then it wasn't assigned to the NBC. It's gone through its waves.
So let's go back to that now.
Go ahead.
We're in this gray area, the scope of the project has changed, we're asking for more money. we don't have a full grasp, and
So-
we're asking to put more money into this project that doesn't seem to have a vehicle driving on the road. It's sort of, how do we in good faith approve this?
So let's take your first statement. The scope hasn't changed. The scope's been reduced.
Now, I'm gonna disagree.
All right.
Because
No, no.
let's go through.
I'm gonna disagree
No,
with that
let-
statement. If we have a base bid and 5 alternates, and we've reduced that scope to the base bid and 3 alternates,
No.
we didn't change the scope.
Let's
We
go to
reduced
my
the scope.
presentation.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna disagree with you.
It's all right. We do that often.
Let's go to the presentation. Let's go through the
But
slides.
no,
PowerPoint?
before you go here, before you go there, I think the route that we need to sort through is, at any point in time, there has to be a clear owner of the project.
Absolutely.
Because these projects are going through the town offices, the MBC, and the Board of Ed, and some projects stay in the Board of Ed,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They're run by the Board of Ed, they're managed by the Board of Ed, they ought to be the responsibility of the Board of Ed.
I'm in agreement.
And some get handed to the MBC, and yet then, at the same moment, then, the Board of Ed has to come back and ask for the funding. So to me, this one's a perfect example of, it was a project that was handed to the MBC,
Right.
but I'm sitting here being responsible to bring back the funding request.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
We're not clear as a town on ownership, and I think we need to get clearer on ownership. I do believe the Board of Ed, for projects the Board of Ed is managing, I love what you said, is you gotta give the responsibility to the Board of Ed, they ought to do the POs, they ought to pay the POs, and that the bookkeeping may flow into Munis the right way, but the responsibility has to be clear.
Right.
It isn't, and.
So you see my angst.
Oh, it's my angst too. All right, so as a
It's been
chair-
mine for 20 years now.
so we've got 3 chairs of boards, and all of us have the same angst. So I think that's something we can go to work on and fix.
Yeah, I believe so.
So now let's go to my argument, because actually a good discussion. It's not an argument.
You got it.
So let's go through the things here. So go up to the top, let's go,
Where am I going?
I don't know. Keep going down now. Go down, go down, go down. Potential options.
Yeah,
Base 1 with all 5 alternates, 1.322824. That's the number we're all hung up on.
Agreed.
This was, go to the next slide.
No, that we would all agree that the 132242824 includes all of this.
Yeah, let's go to the
Yeah,
next slide though. Please, let me get through this. The option 2 is alternates 1, 2, and 3 that was presented to us.
Right.
We're not in there. Let's go to option 3. Alternates 1 and 3 was presented to us. Let's go down to option 4. Option 4 was alternate 3 was presented to us to pass. Let's go down to the option 5. Base work only.
Yep.
We're not even in the same configuration as what was presented to us. Forget the scope. We had 5 different scopes of opportunities here, and we're not even within these scopes of opportunity for the $1.32 million.
no, we've mixed and matched the different scopes, meaning we've taken a base bid and 2 of those alternates.
But you
Alternates 2
presented
and
us
3.
5 options that we
And
put
again,
forth.
Glenn, we've had this discussion. The fault here falls on a little bit on us and a little bit on Tecton, because when you present a base bid and 5 alternates, we try not to do this line item detail, because the alternates, the method of using alternates is so we can afford something on bid day and award something. And I've used the new school as an example for this, where we had some 15 alternates with this new school project. We awarded most of them, and we're still substantially under budget. That includes 10 new classrooms.
Right.
On bid day, if we weren't able to afford those 10 new classrooms, we would have taken that off the base bid and still have had a biddable or awardable project. That's not the way this was exactly set up by Tecton in its presentation. That was incorrect.
Right.
So-
This is sort of lost me though, like I said. This is what we as a Board of Finance reviewed, went over,
Yep.
and went, what if we said the new school was gonna be K through 8, and all of a sudden we said, no, it's only gonna be K through 2 now. But we spent $16 million, the town would be like, we're not doing this
But
anymore.
by the same token, when the NBC received the new school, we received it with a scope that had 8 classrooms per grade.
Mm.
And that was increased. And we came to the Board of Ed
I'm
and to the
in
Board of
agreement.
Selectmen at that point and said, if this is over, you're going to have to do one thing, reduce scope or increase the budget. Thankfully, knock on wood, we were fortunate on bid day there.
2 different projects though, 2 different management
projects.
processes.
However,
2
the
different
scope on both of those was modified post bond grant.
but not asking for more money.
Not yet. We could have been there with the new school, but we're here with the locker room.
But we're not there with the new school.
No, but we could have been.
Coulda,
But,
wouldas,
it's-
coulda,
it's-
wouldas, and shouldas.
But
ain't
it's
working.
it's the same process.
No, this
So-
process, I feel, it didn't work. It really didn't work. Now, let's go
No,
on.
I agree that this process here didn't work.
All right.
Absolutely, we'll agree on that.
So let's
point.
go to the Excel sheet again then. So let's go back to that quick. So now we get through this, we approve the 1.322 million, and we're getting asked for, some of these notes are wrong, so please understand that. Note 3, the $52,000 contingency. I get what you're saying, however, go to the next tab, over. In the Tecton document, it says construction contingency,
Zero.
non-assumes hard bid. So we're getting conflicting documentation.
No, that's saying, they didn't include construction contingency in their number.
Because it's a
Again,
hard bid from the consultant, from the
Right,
construction
but when
company.
you finance it on the town side, you need to include these soft costs. That was the root of our initial discussion, was that these projects, when they're being funded, and we're receiving information like this from consultants, that we need to look at that and say, hey guys, when you take down a wall in the locker room, and for lack of a better comparison, not that it's there, but you have an asbestos-containing pipe that's not noted on the construction documents because nobody knew it was there, we need some vehicle to be able to move this project along.
So where
And that's
in the
what
process
construction
that was brought to the
contingency is
Board of Finance on that 1.322 million, was there a line for contingency?
You'd have to ask Tecton about that.
But this is a roundabout, Paul, you're
No,
roundabout
no,
me.
I'm not roundabouting you, Glenn. What I'm saying, it's very clear. On the hard construction cost, at that point, when we went to the public and we saw this estimate, it should have included a contingency line item for
What's
a
very
max
clear to me
expenditure.
is the whole project hasn't been managed properly. That's a very clear route for me. There's
You know
not
what?
been one thing.
I'll agree with you on the project, as far as the financials, has not been managed properly. You're absolutely right. It hasn't been budgeted properly.
So how did the Board of Selectmen approve this, and how did we get to the Board of Finance? Because this is still a financial mess as far as I'm concerned.
We have a scope, we have a hard bid for that scope. We are, whatever the number is, 56,000, Joey, what's the number on that? Shy?
Yeah, it's 50,000.
You're 64,000 shy on the bid, you're 52,000 on the contingency. It's right there, the numbers are there, 64, unless I can't see, 64,705 is your shy, right? Is that wrong, or is there math wrong there?
I don't know that, I don't recognize the 1387, the number they gave me was
Oh, okay.
1372. So it's a little bit different.
All
It was
right.
50, it was 50,000 on the bid.
Okay.
So, project can't be awarded unless you have the additional appropriation.
So wait, then let's go to the real numbers, because then it doesn't add up to the ask. What's the ask? The ask is,
That's on this sheet here.
yeah, what's the ask?
Tried to make it as simple as I could.
Yep.
The budget was 1,322,824, the bid came in at 1,372,000,
Right?
and that's about 50,000 short, and then the 68,000 of the contingency and soft costs. Short and simple,
Right.
and so that's how you get to 117.
Okay. So, now, also, what was preventing us from going back to the bidder and saying, this is our budget, we want all this in?
Public low bid construction.
Yep.
You can't do that. You can't negotiate with a low bidder and ultimately reduce the scope such that it would modify that whole system. All right? You know, there are rules around public low bid construction, and, you know.
I'm very familiar with public bid, I deal with.
No, okay, so.
I just got beat down by New York City for $3 million.
I'll be there in the morning.
So,
You know, there are certain things. Can we do certain things? We can. This has already been pared back.
now,
And I'm gonna say one thing too.
go ahead.
In part of that, you end up getting about 70 cents on the dollar back. You know, sometime when you make these reductions. So there's also that fiscal part that you kind of think of, all right, to save 50, I've got to cut out 70 or 80.
So, once we put out this bid,
Yeah.
just so I'm clear, we get the bid number, and I had it wrong, and I apologize for that, because this was my quick notes. What if we said we're not gonna do the office, the locker room, office, and toilet? What if we said we're gonna remove option whatever 4 it is?
Then you want to have a toilet on that side for the,
I'm just saying, could that be done in this process?
it wasn't, again, it wasn't bid that way, where it says, what's your line item for alternate 4? It was bid as a single bid process. So it wasn't a
I-
Chinese menu. I think it would be short-sighted if you remove that scope. Because you wouldn't have a toilet on that side, so when you have both teams in there after any type of sporting event, or during halftime of any sporting event, the team that's on that lower side, closer to the inside of the school, would not have an accessible toilet there.
Anybody else have any questions while I'm going here? Dan, Brian, Mary?
I saw in 21, we approved 100,000.
That was COVID.
That, we did approve 100,000, we anticipated that to be bonded, so it went through the Board of Finance, but that year we could never have a referendum, and so anything that was bonded in that year never went to fruition because it wasn't approved by the townspeople.
I apologize, I had that, I didn't pass it on.
This doesn't specifically have to do with money, but with the outdoor accessible bathrooms, which I'm completely all in favor of, but also with all this concerns about school security, once someone accesses school bathrooms from the
Cannot get in.
They
outside,
can't get in.
okay.
Yeah.
Great question.
And Glenn, I know we've had this discussion before. The NBC, for all intents and purposes, is a program manager. We are a facilitator of a process that when a capital request comes in from the BOE, which really is too large for them to handle in-house, it comes to the NBC, and we manage the process. We have no funding. We have no requirement or ability to request funding. You know, I can't come here and on behalf of the BOE and say, hey, we have no stake in the game. So really, at the end of the day, this is gonna sound bad, and sorry, Bob, sorry, Joey, I really don't care if this project moves forward or not,
No, and I
because
appreciate
it's
that.
just additional work for the NBC. However, do I believe it's the right project for the town? Yeah, I think moving this forward is the right position and the right
Well,
direction.
that's our struggle. I think
And
all
I
of
know
us
that.
on this board feel that it's right, but all of us feel that from the start, we had an issue from the very start of this project. We had an issue 3 years ago. We stumbled through it. And now we're at this stage here where we thought it was heading good financially, number-wise, and everything backed up, and we hit this hurdle, and it's a difficult process for us
Yep.
to process. The second thing on the table we haven't talked about tonight is we asked the town attorney for an opinion that are we able to bring this on our own and approve this money without going to another town meeting because the scope has drastically changed. And I will say, you know, we say little changes, dollar-wise, it's a 33% change of what we anticipated to get.
Yeah.
So out of your 1.3 million, $444,000 are cut out of it, the original estimate. So that's 33% of the scope has been cut out dollar-wise. Now, I know exponential, it might not work
And that's
because.
that's because that's what the cost of the
HVAC.
discovery was,
Right, so
unfortunately.
this is, do we have, and we've asked, 3 months ago,
Did we
asked
get
for.
an answer?
No, we have no town attorney opinion on this, which leaves us in the lurk of, do we even have the authority to pass this without it going back to the voters? Because the voters thought we were getting base plus 5 options.
Yep.
Now we're base plus 2 options. If we put it back to the voters, they might say, well, let's just do the base and do the bare minimums. You know, that, do we have this right to add money to it and change the scope with the taxpayer dollars? It's over $1 million bucks.
Isn't your question there, I'm sorry for jumping
Go ahead,
in,
no,
but
please
isn't
do.
your question there whether there's another step after you approve?
Or before we approve.
I don't know, you don't usually go to a town meeting before you approve.
But we don't even know we have the right to approve.
Right.
Well, you would approve it one way or the other, you might just not be the final approval.
We don't approve anything until we know, until it's, goes through the right process. And we know what we're approving. I mean, how can we approve something?
Well, what questions can we answer on what you know what you're approving? I guess that would be the question I would ask you all
Right now,
today.
we know what we're being asked to approve.
Yes.
We
I
might
don't,
have
because
a.
I actually don't, because I spent some time this week, looking at old meetings and old presentations from 20 and 21. And some of what's been said tonight is contradictory to what was said in those meetings. So, and I'm not gonna go into detail on timelines and what caused overbids, and there was never a mention in any of those meetings about the mechanicals. There was talks about other stuff, there was talks about overtime, there was talks about timing, there was talks about a lot of stuff. At least in the 3 meetings that I watched, there was never a mention of mechanicals. So perhaps there's other meetings during the 2-year period that mention that. So I am uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable with the way the project's been presented for years. There was one point in time in April of 20 where I thought it made sense, and then we approved something, but it didn't go into the budget that year because of COVID. So it took a whole nother year for it to go out to bid. And on September of 21, we had a Board of Finance meeting where the first selectman at the time walked through the process. And it was in the spring of 21 that it actually went out to bid. After,
The original, yeah.
yes. So, and the explanation of the increases that's when it was 3.1, but $1 million of that was because we were trying to get it done during that summer.
Yep.
There was no component.
So then, if it was gonna be done under normal circumstances, it was gonna be $2.2 million, and maybe there was, the mechanical issue was embedded in that, but it certainly wasn't mentioned in that particular meeting to us. All that was told to us was, we're taking a fresh look at it. So that was a year ago. In that year, in these Board of Finance meetings, we've been asking for updates, we've been asking for questions, we've been asking for special meetings, we've been asking for joint meetings. Haven't gotten anything, other than, we're working on it, when it's time, we'll come to you. We asked for a joint meeting 30 days ago, we asked for town attorney opinion 30 days ago, and none of it is, now we're just kind of being given a packet of paper and saying rubber stamp it, and I don't, the numbers don't make sense. The numbers from then to now, I know there's mixing and matching. I'm kind of all over the place now, but I don't get it. I'm not comfortable.
And
Really not.
Dan, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What I'm gonna say is, at any one given point in time, here at the Board of Finance meeting, the MBC was never asked.
Mhm.
We do have communications, and a host of communications, both with the prior administration and this administration, and some Glenn were copied on, going through this along that entire timeline, from 20 to 21, the rebid. This was the time when it was taken away from the MBC. Julian went to some outside firm that, on state contract to get pricing, and then we were told that that's the way it was gonna go, and then it came back to us for rebid. This process was all explained, and we have, I'll be more than happy to, bundle up all those emails and send them out to you. Because
But I only got, the ones that I got were stating that we actually put in the spec wrong for what we were replacing and not replacing.
No, you were copying in up. Yeah, I'm not gonna debate what you were copying. We only get about 500 emails a day, and sometimes when you're copying on something, you don't actually read it. A lot went to Mr. Dunn, a lot went to Ms. Carr on this, stating, hey, look, we did the postmortem. There was other things that were asked for that we didn't know about during the design process, like air conditioning. That was, unbeknownst to us. Storage lofts in the cardio room on top of the existing mechanical, when access stairs. There was a lot of scope creep there too, in that 3.1 million or ultimately the 2.2 million. Now, if we paired that out and said we came in at 1.8 with this process and this scope, if we came to you at 1.8 and said, hey, we need 500,000. So when it got down to that point, it was discussed with the Board of Ed Facilities Committee. It it was discussed with the superintendent, it was discussed with Steve Baldwin and Mark Belanda. How do we reduce the scope? What is the package that we should be going back out for rebid with? And that was the direction that we all agreed on, was base bid and those two alternates. Those were the most critical portions of this package. Now, whether town attorney opinion comes in or not, you can always have an approval. Now, you can always have a motion, let me say, take the word approval off the, you can always have a motion to move it forward pending a town attorney approval or a town meeting.
No, I'm not getting another nasty grant from Mr. Herbst. I
Okay.
am not going there. So let's be clear where that
Okay.
line is drawn.
Look, that's
Before
fine.
you
I don't
bring it
know,
up,
I
let's
don't
be
know that
clear.
history, Glenn.
Let's
That
be
is
clear where that
beyond
line
me.
is drawn. I will not take another email. The next
All right.
email from Mr. Herbst will go to my attorney. Okay, so
Again,
we're not
I don't
going
know
out
that
there. We're
history,
not
so I
putting our
appreciate
necks
that.
out there and doing this
You got
because
it.
of the situation that's been put before this board by the selectmen. Let's call it what it is. We've been put in a box, and we're not gonna step out of that box. We asked for a clarification tonight from the town attorney.
Okay.
We didn't get it. Let's call it what it is.
That's fine.
And
don't
this
think-
is, and you're asking us to go outside of a box, which prior administrations we would have done. Absolutely, prior administrations, we would have said, you know what, let's go ahead and let's do this. But the box that we've been put in and the nasty grams that have come across in emails and the disrespect that's come from our town attorney's firm puts us in a box, we can't approve this.
Understood.
And Dan's right, we're gonna go through a process, and until the town attorney's firm, because he likes to use that word firm, because now I'm on a roll, is we are not gonna do it till we get a letter from him saying this is absolutely good. Now, we're also not gonna do a special meeting in the next 3 days. The quote's only valid for the 3 days, we're not doing that either. We're volunteers, we've asked for this prior, we're not doing it. So, that's where we're at right now with this thing. Because this is a
I get you.
situation that we've been put in that we can't get out of. Because if we do approve it and we're wrong, you know I'll be crucified. This will be read in a letter at a meeting that Glenn Rooney did something, okay? So let's be clear, the precedent that's been set.
I got you. I hear you.
So to preach all this stuff, Glenn, put your neck out and put your board's neck out there to do this. It's not fair to us.
I wasn't preaching, Glenn. I
To
was
add a
offering.
little clarification, I wrote our first selectman a note this morning reminding her of your request. First thing this morning, saying, are you prepared to bring that answer back today? Her request to our town attorney only went out for the first time this morning. I don't think the town attorney was asked. And so it's not a surprise to me that the town attorney hasn't given us an opinion, but it's not his fault. I mean, he's a bit of a, he pushes back hard on these questions, I know that, but he wasn't asked.
I have a problem, like I say. I'll also read C6-10 of the town attorney. Be the legal advisor to all town officers, boards, commissions, and agencies. We didn't get that back. We've asked for it a month ago. We asked for it 3 months ago, Bob, when you had a special meeting here. We talked about this.
We did.
Like, this wasn't the first time this was discussed. We discussed this many months ago that we needed an opinion from the town attorney to go forward.
I remember it vividly.
Yes, so then we re-asked it last meeting when you were also here,
I agree with that.
and we don't have it. And Paul, to your point again, we can't put our necks out there. And this is, it's a shame. It's a disservice to the town as well. It saddens me, if you want to know the truth. But I think we've had enough discussion on this, so.
But I just want to, so we've got two conflated issues, and I want to make sure I'm clear on.
We're going to vote on each one.
No.
No, he's talking about the-
On the boys' locker room.
Yeah, exactly.
Conflated issue number one is, do you need to go to a town meeting? What authorities are vested in who to approve this? That's a town attorney opinion or whatnot. The second, as I heard very clearly, I have more questions. So what I'd like to do, and Dan, I'm looking at you, is let's articulate those questions, and we'll get them to Paul primarily, because he's been through that, and where the Board of Ed
I agree.
team can add to that, we will do that.
Yeah.
But let's get your questions
agree with
answered,
that.
so that when you do have clarity on process, that you also have answers to your questions. And I would just urge the board here to, let's not rehash a lot of history on this, but let's ask questions that are really points of clarity on what happened and why. And because if we could kill ourselves on the angst of a long, drawn-out process. We've been at this for years,
Yep.
right? And you know what? I step back from it. I'm going to tell you what I step back from. I step back from, we need to do something on this locker room. This isn't a bad proposal. It's not costing the town anything because we're just rebalancing within 2 projects on the thing. I want it to be well vetted, right? But I don't want to kill the project on the way, right, of well vetting it. So I just urge you to keep all of the big picture in mind. Let's answer your questions, right? And let's do it right. Because
Right.
that's what we've always done together as boards. And then let's go push hard on the powers that be on the process question. That's a second question. They're both equal.
But I'm gonna in my opinion, even though we're using this extra money, it's still the money. We're facing so many things right now. We're also looking at the SROs, we talked about that, the police people we're adding. The police station was overloaded 3 years ago, before we're adding police officers. And we're not in disagreement, we need these, so let's be clear on that process. But they're gonna be coming to us anytime now saying, we really need a new police station. We're packed so hard.
No, I'm with you
But
on
I'm
that,
saying,
and I'm
so
not debating that.
100,000 here, 200,000 there is all we're putting burden on these taxpayers. We're gonna be looking at least 6% per budget increases over the next 3 years, each of the years. It could be more. We are pushing these envelopes, so any envelope we can bring back a little bit is less burden on the taxpayers. And I get, this is project leftover money, but it's still money that we
It's
could.
also within that bonding, right? But I understand.
But if we
your
don't
point.
spend it, what happens
I
to it?
understand your point.
If we don't
So-
spend
So
it,
if the questions are focused on what can you do if you don't spend the extra money, I'm all with you, right? If the questions are, oh man, what was I told on May of 2 years ago versus what was said in June of 2 years ago versus what's being said now, I'm less excited about that, but I'd be more excited about getting the help of the Board of Finance on hard questions about spending,
Yeah.
right? That's a better use of our time.
Yeah, so I will,
You understand my point?
I do
though?
understand your point, I completely agree with it. I will tell you that one of my questions, which we all identified a half hour ago, that I'll need answered in order to vote yes, is if we appropriate additional money, who is accountable that we can go to? What board is responsible for that money? And if it's well, it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, and it's a combination, then it's a no.
the other question. that
To
you're-
me, when a project is handed off to the MB, it's, first of all, when the project comes from brought forward by the Board of Education, handed to the first selectman to manage, it's the first selectman's responsibility. Further handed to the MBC, the MBC with a contingency for soft costs
Yep.
and appropriately. It's theirs to keep it in, and if it's a problem, they take it back to the first selectman.
Yep.
This thing is backwards, it has to go all the way back to the original proposals. Now, if the Board of Ed had been owning and managing and responsible for it, I would feel differently. And we do that on most of our projects.
Yes.
And by the way, most of the projects we've been bringing in under budget, right? This is one of two, I think, out of
That's an
40.
agreement.
Out of
I agree with
40
that.
projects.
Out of 40
right.
projects, this is one of two that's come in over, and the other one was the Wisconsin wall, right? Which I think
That's
we all
not your fault,
understand.
then we get all that.
So I think your question on ownership is 100% right on, because it's all conflated.
Yep.
But then,
And by the way, it showed up on the Wisconsin wall, because I'll tell you, when we went to the we were told, you have to bring forward, the Board of Ed, you have to bring forward this additional funding request. We did for the Wisconsin wall. Nobody had told us you guys had already approved 96,000. And I'm like, are you kidding me? How could I now be required to bring forward a funding request when you didn't bother to tell me
Wow.
when you brought forward
Right,
96.
but it was brought to us, so we had no idea.
Yeah,
When it was
I
brought to us-
I wasn't at the table, so obviously
When it's
your
brought to
presumption
us,
was the process was in the selectmen.
And we understood the urgency.
Yeah.
So that process is just supporting you, it was brought to us. And I guess that's also part of my problem in this process. Things are brought to this Board of Finance that we gotta ask a lot of questions on. We should be the last review, not the ironing out the kinks board. We should be the board that looks at the numbers, say they add up and make sense. We now are becoming the iron the kinks board now. You know, that's not our role, and that's part of this frustration. When you're asking productive questions, is who now, like Dan's saying, who owns it, but who controls the contingency? Again, how do,
If it's assigned to the NBC,
how does that process work?
and the process we set up actually with the school, and this is under Steve Dunn, with the new school project, was, 0 to 5,000, it's NBC and Arcadis. 5 to 10,000, agreement from the first selectman, NBC chair, and our OPM, owners project manager. And then over that 10,000, it has to go to the full NBC. So we routinely, during our monthly meetings, review change orders. We review PCOs, potential change orders. I have to tell you, we're not kind on saying, oh yeah, you know what, we have 4 million, go ahead, we'll approve this. We take every dollar as an owner dollar. We are taxpayers as our board, right? As our commission is. Every one of us are taxpayers. We take those very, very seriously, and we look to save the town money at every turn, and even asking for, and we'll go to the Wisconsin wall, there was a list of 8 questions that came up from the contractor the other day. Max from Common Engineering sent it over to me and sent it over to Dan. We responded back to Max. He brought it back to the contractor, and 7 of those 8 are, yeah, no.
So, and it's fair to say you look at those change orders relative to the contingency budget that you have.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that brings back the process now. Who's owning this thing, and what process are you gonna have in place for the contingency money for us to consider that? Because again, on the school, you have a process. This project, we don't have that skeleton to show us.
And in talking about how do we own things, how do we budget them, how do we move forward, that should be part of that larger discussion, where there are contingency funds. If it's a project with the Board of Ed, is it the Board of Ed chair, the NBC chair up to a certain amount? Is it the Board of Finance chair, the Board of Ed chair, and the NBC chair up to another amount? How do we manage that, and how do we mark it? I can tell you from my personal experience in New York, we have this set up on every project from the beginning. Every school district, every client we work with these contingency monies, we have a process of up to 5,000, 5 to 10, and over 10. And it's written at the beginning of the project. We should have that in a document in this town.
I guess that's my frustration with this project. We want to support the Board of Ed. We've been supporting the Board of Ed. The projects have all been really good and solid. This one is just fallen down on too many things. And it's almost like, and the school's running well, but it's almost like we got too comfortable and we sort of lost sight of this project a little bit.
Well, and unfortunately, this high school in and of itself has been this albatross for years. When we did the high school project, Glenn, you'll remember, every ceiling we took down, there wasn't a firewall that extended to the underside of the deck. These are all those types of discovered conditions that scare me in this high school.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's why that's why I'm packing
I
up.
wasn't sure if that was frustration or if that was.
There's a little frustration in there,
It's gotta be
because what we're
frustration.
doing is holding this project
I know.
hostage for the bigger picture.
Both of
And,
them.
and I will just, I will repeat myself to all of you. It's a bit of a frustration because it's something the town does want, it is needed, it's fundable, we can get on with it. And I do understand the frustrations, I do. I've been in your shoes, as you know. And I do think we have a lot of work to go do. I just don't know how long this is gonna get held up, and on this important project, while we dig around on this. Right? And I will just, you're fully in your rights, but I'm also in my rights to tell you I'm very frustrated.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I
Respect that.
And we do have a window for ordering material, mechanical units and such. That's closing on us.
Right.
That if it doesn't happen, it'd either be more expensive or the project's gonna.
But let's go back to that
Be
process too,
tabled.
because you brought it up. The quote was valid for 90 days, and we're getting down to it on day 87.
We can have a discussion with that contractor, with the diversity
When
group,
you go get an extension on
and
it,
ask them for a 15 or a 30-day extension on the price.
we should do that.
So when you ask who's responsible, as far as I'm concerned, and with agreement with the Board of Ed on both the Wisconsin Wall and the locker room, it's an MDC project. That's what it was stated at the Board of Selectmen meetings. And if there's disagreement on that, we'll have it here now, and if you guys want to manage it, have at it.
Well, I don't want to move on.
You know, believe me, we don't need the extra work for free.
Thank you for your time on a very
Thank you.
challenging discussion. And I won't repeat myself, but
I understand.
I just urge you and I request that you help us move this along the pace. So,
Yep. Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
and thank you for the good luck wishes.
Yeah.
Glenn, do you need me for anything else?
Thank you for everything.
You dismissing me?
I'm not dismissing
I'm
you
just-
ever.
Thanks for all your time, gentlemen.
Dan, thank you.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Marcia.
John Lucas sends his regrets. Apparently Teslas get flat tires and they don't come with spares. It was on his to-do list, but he is stuck on the side of the road.
Nice.
Oh, no.
Hi, John. So, since we're on this topic, are we gonna move on the
Let's have the
wall?
vote. Yeah, I agree. We're on the topic. I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion that the Board of Finance approve the additional expenditure of the amount of $68,500 over and above the bid amount of $796,000 for the completion of the WMS wall refurbishment project to be funded from capital non-reoccurring. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any more discussion on this? As a summary of it, I think we're all in discussion. It was an emergency project. It had to be done, and it was managed that way as an emergency project, and these things came up that were unexpected.
Yes.
So, no more discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. We can vote on the boys' locker room right now.
I wouldn't even bring it to vote. You don't have to bring it to vote? Do we?
So I think we would-
Table
I mean, was anybody making the, I mean, if anybody's supporting it, they can make a motion.
Do you make a
You
motion
don't have
to
to
table it?
if BOS approved it?
Yeah, if the
Oh, we do.
BOS approved it, I think.
Do we have to
vote on
okay,
it.
fine.
We have to
Fine.
make a motion on it, so
Fine.
I'll make a motion that we approve the amount of $117,176,000 for the BHS Boys Locker Room project, which would be funded from the bonded capital of the Wisconsin Middle School electrical project. Do I have a second? Second.
Well, if you don't second it, you can't go to vote.
And we seconded now.
All right, fine.
So for discussion, I think we've talked about this. We need an opinion, we feel, from the town attorney. We haven't got it yet, so until we get that, they'll have to re-bring it to us, and that's how we move
In
forward.
the meantime, we
That's
have
my-
some financial questions that we'll put together.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the scope's been changed a lot. I think taxpayers need to know what's going on here and have a say, personally. We'll see what the town attorney says, but even with the town attorney's opinion, this is a big cut in a project. It's very different than what was described 2 years ago. I think a town meeting hopefully will be, that will be his opinion, and we'll bring it to the town and make sure that people are on board with this.
So that we don't lose any momentum that we had so far in the project, can we ask, or I guess MBC would know anyway, to try and get the extension?
I think that's how they left it. They're going to leave it to get an extension right now,
Probably
to
the
keep it,
longest one they can get.
yeah, probably 15 days, I would say. I'm not comfortable with the numbers, you know that.
I'm not.
I'm not comfortable with the management. It still hasn't been totally described, even here tonight. Paul said the NBC is going, but Bob didn't really give it the nod, nor have they approved it. Again, we don't have the opinion that we've asked for. We've heard a lot of different opinions that it's still in the scope of work, but it's 33% different, dollar-wise.
Mhm.
That means a lot. I mean, we talked about, even they should have brought us the air handler on a separate project. Kept the boys' locker room as is, because then the numbers would have made sense, apples to apples. The additional air handler could have been a separate item, because it was basically a maintenance issue anyway.
Right.
So then his numbers might have made more sense to us.
Yep.
It didn't come that way. It's been since day one, like you said, Dan, we've struggled with this. We didn't have clear cut 3 years ago. It's been paired up, sent around, chopped up, diced, and it's not what we presented to the taxpayers. And even in the presentation, it showed we gave a lot of different options, but not the one we're sitting on.
And it's one thing if you value engineer something like the whiskey near the wall, taking out a third of
The dollar
plan
wise,
here,
the third of the dollars.
well,
And a third of the-
even,
of the-
even a third of the map here,
Right.
the plans, is not a value engineer, it's a different
It's
project.
a different project. I mean, let's take it to the logical extreme. The town approved $1.3 million for the boys' locker room project. There's been a change. What if they came back and said, oh, for $1.3 million, all we can do is paint? Would that be a change in the project, or would that be part of the, I mean,
Would have
that's
been
a
part of the
logical.
scope. They were gonna
it's
paint
part-
it.
Yes, I mean, that's a logical extreme, obviously, but where's the line?
Right.
Where's the line?
I don't have any more to say
Yeah.
about it. So bring it to vote. All those in favor? All those against? Aye. Motion fails 4-0 unanimously. But I will say that we're open to this coming back. We're open to this being redone in a way that can be explained better and with an opinion.
I would say not only are we open for it, but we're anxious for it and interested in participating in that process that Bob suggested. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm totally.
Yep.
Totally. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I love the outside bathrooms because that's a town thing.
Yep.
That football games, Friday football.
Yeah.
I don't go, but I know a lot of people in town that don't even have kids go.
Yep.
So this is not just for the school.
Absolutely.
This is for the town,
Yep.
and I see that. So I just don't see us feeling comfortable approving town taxpayer dollars
Right.
on something we don't understand or don't have an opinion on. All right. So we move to that. Marcia, we go back to you.
So I would just say that I can answer any questions that you might have based on the reports that I sent. The audit update, the auditors have been here for 3 days and are scheduled to be here for 7 more. I think it's going well. Last month, I was very, very concerned about getting the audit done. I'm less concerned now that I think that we started with them in a really good place, that they've essentially just sat in here and are still working through the initial papers or electronic papers that we gave them on day one. That's the way we like to do an audit, where they just sit and don't bother us. And as far as I know, they have had they have no issues so far.
Okay.
Since it's just us, I'm gonna ask a question. We heard the Board of Ed's 500,000 in the
Yeah.
hole, 800,000 because they're predicting savings, which sometimes your savings predictions don't always come to fruition. Where are we on the town side in the hole?
On the town side, we have health insurance for about 30, and we have the fuel, which may be about 50. We always have quarterly budget meetings. I sent out the invite today to schedule those for next week, because we always do it at the end of September. We're doing it a week early so we have some time. We've asked them to look at their budget for things like efficiencies, that if you look at just as part of going through getting ready for the audit and looking at the budget to actuals, Public Works, that we do overtime, but we have per diem people in the budget that we didn't use that much. Would it be cheaper? Are we allowed to do it with the union contracts? Can we spend smarter? That if you look at one of the departments, the highest paid is getting the most overtime, can we spread that overtime down to lower paid people? So are we using our people most efficiently, and the combination of people most efficiently? What if is there things Tara had talked about a freeze, and Harry had talked about a freeze. I don't like that term as much, just because at the Board of Ed, they can say, well, we're gonna freeze these 7 objects. What do we freeze? Do we say no ammunition? That, I mean, that, we'll put little pieces of cardboard in there or something? I don't know. But, so to me, it makes more sense that we talk about, are there things that we could cut or delay? And so we'll talk about that in the budget meetings next week. Are there things like, right now, when somebody leaves, we just automatically fill that position? Shouldn't we have a conversation? Is that the best way to fill the position? Could we restructure that position? Could we have a conversation before we fill any position? And could we have in that conversation, could we talk about waiting 60 days to fill it? That right now we're doubling up on a lot of salaries because people are leaving with vacation times and things. And if it's, an administrative assistant where there's 5 administrative assistants in that department, what would happen if we waited 60 days? If it's a police chief, we can't do it, but at least have the discussion. So that's what we've been talking about. So we'll know more at your next meeting.
So what's the numbers again? Run them through me one more time. 30,000 for health?
And this is top of my head numbers.
Yep.
30,000 for health and about 50,000 for fuel.
So you're only 80,000, so we're only 600,000 against our contingency right now. How much is our contingency?
391.
Okay, so we're 200,000 off only, is what you're telling me.
When we talk about oil right now, are you basing that just off the spot price now?
So we have every 2 weeks that we have, and I can send it to you, we get an update from the provider, and we've had several conversations with the provider that we currently use, Mitchell, and they've been very good at that. And so what we're doing is just watching it fluctuate, and the calculation that we're using is how much if we did the locked-in price for the whole year. However, right now we're spending at market rates that, and sometimes depending on the period, the market rates are lower because the locked-in price is obviously assuming that it's going to go up. So we're just waiting. Tara is looking and trying to decide when we should lock in. But they've recommended that we lock in before heating season starts. They recommended that we lock in fuel, propane, which we're talking $20,000 budget. Lock in propane before October 1st, and so that is. Jules is preparing the bid, but we've never locked in propane before, so we don't have tank sizes and locations, so we're waiting to get back some stuff that we need to make the bid. So,
If they're considering like a cap plan, which typically doesn't make sense, but when you're in a high volatility environment, the cap plan basically gives you a cap on your rates, so you basically set your rate, your max rate that you would pay, and then if it's below, you pay market rate. It does cost money to do that, but in a high volatility environment, it's something we should be, we're even looking at that, but who knows? It might be something. Yeah, you're hedging. Basically, you're hedging your upside.
Mitchell hasn't talked about a cap plan.
On the school side.
School side.
Yeah.
But the school side, how come it's come down that much? Because when we were first talking, it was like 600,000. Harry was right, it was 600,000 when we were first talking.
So Harry's talking about, we had a great dollar amount, that Harry is talking about how much it was over last year, that, and we're talking about how much it is over budget. So the budget already went up, so I can pull it up.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
I mean,
You don't have to, I get it now.
And fuel prices have come down 20% the last.
Right.
Yeah, that, so yeah, it's kind of been all over the place. That,
So
we
we're
haven't-
we're 200,000 off right now.
Yeah.
on expenditures?
On our side, less.
Total,
Total.
total net, with the contingency.
Well, if they can make up the fuel, yes, if they can make up the things that they
Their
talked about.
351 is on their side. They got like 860 to 351, brings it to 500,000, 520. You're talking 80,000, so we're at 600,000. We have 380 in the contingency.
Yeah,
So you're looking at 220, $200,000
got it, yes,
of makeup.
correct.
Now, where do we stand on the revenue side projected wise to offset that?
So we've got extra money from the FEMA vaccine that it's too early to tell on some of these. We don't know of any definite variances besides that. Some of the closing things, I think that they're going to find some more revenue that they're researching. Some of the liabilities didn't, like for AP exams, aren't washing out, so I think that they'll hit revenue instead.
So rough estimate,
Another
guesstimate,
40.
total guess.
I think right now, it's FEMA, the 150 from FEMA, and from FEMA IDA, 50 from FEMA vaccine, and we're still working through that FEMA reopening, and so far they haven't disallowed anything over 530, but I don't know the process, if they
So-
just disallowed all at the end.
Do we feel good about the 200,000? The 150, and the first one you mentioned, 150 and the
Yeah.
50.
We feel good about the 150, we feel good about the 50.
We kind of included that in the miscellaneous revenue that we put in.
And then we did include
Good
some
question.
of that in miscellaneous, and we have interest income is
Right.
coming in great.
Oh, it's gonna be wonderful.
That, so that's, so
So
we should, yeah.
what you're saying is, as of now, we could manage this as long as we toe the line from today's point on. This is all manageable within the budget. All of these scares we have now are manageable within the budget as long as we go forward on a fiscally frugal
They'll
rest of
still,
the year.
So there's no
There's-
other, I
there's
thought there were other wild cards that are still known unknowns that could pop up, or are those all for future budget years? I'm thinking, I mean, some of them.
SROs is gonna come,
Yeah,
we're
SROs
using
and-
ARPA,
and-
we're using
and,
ARPA
yeah.
this year, so using a one-time
Yeah.
revenue
And the-
offset.
Right,
We gained more money against the debt bubble that we talked about tonight. We got an extra 400,000 on premium to
Yep.
carry us
The
through the
rifles
debt
took
bubble.
care of.
So that's gonna ease it.
we
So-
still have 200,000 in ARPA that, although no one's gonna wanna use ARPA for a town meeting for fuel, but,
No, we can manage this within, as long as from this point going forward, we have no other room. We have-
however, when we manage it, excuse me, here, it will be, if we are using the excess revenue, it will be an additional appropriation.
Right.
But we'll know that it's gonna, it's hitting fund balance at the end because of the excess
Right,
revenue. But I'll have a better analysis, an updated analysis on the 23 numbers.
So I guess what I'm trying to say, as long as we don't dig a deeper hole, we can still fill this one up.
Yeah.
It'll be close, I understand it, but I mean, we won't be adding to the general fund, and we're gonna lose percentage points on that. But I mean, right now, there's a hole, but we can fill the hole.
Just stop thinking.
Stop digging.
Yeah.
No more special requests.
Right. And I gotta say, that whole taking the money is not costing money, it's still costing us
Yeah.
money. I mean, I was disappointed in that statement, because that money would go back to the town, or we wouldn't bond it, right? Or it's already bonded, but it would still come back to the town.
We wouldn't have to bond something else.
Right, right. So that, it's not like just free money that doesn't cost, there's a cost.
Yep.
So, all right. I'm good. Anybody else with questions for Marcia?
No, thank you, Mark.
No, thank you. Thank you. Public comment? Nobody's here. Anything else to come before the board before I make a motion? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.